Good afternoon. It is Sunday, July 7th, 2024, and I have spent the better part of my afternoon making food for the week and watching videos about how to craft a health plan. Not really finding anything that is as detailed as I'm looking for, but that's good because I'm feeling like I can add value, like I have some ideas about steps and phases that I'm not hearing readily available. At this point in my journey of becoming a health coach, I'm limiting my search for certifications to only those programs that certify and train people in the use of functional labs, because I think that data is very, very important, and it's good to get all your data in place before you begin a plan so that you can measure progress. For me, that's incredibly important when it comes to staying motivated. I need to be able to see that the changes that I'm implementing are putting me closer to the goals that I've identified. So I wanted to take a break from doing that to make a video talking about when and how and why I got off psychiatric medications after the better part of the after taking them consistently for the better part of a decade of my life. And do my makeup while I'm doing that, so I have something to do with my hands. So in thinking about becoming a health coach, I had to make a decision about how to approach the very controversial subject of psychiatric medications, and did I want to take a stand that might be more controversial and might limit my marketability as a coach. And after having spent the last 2 to 3 years reading authors such as Robert Whitaker, Peter Goach, Sam Tamini, Joanna Moncrief, or at least watching their videos or reading their books, Dr. Jessica Taylor, the incredible amount of brilliant, qualified, educated people who've come down on the side there's incontrovertible evidence that these medications are harmful and do not do the things they are promised to do. And the net benefit to patients simply isn't there. And these are medical doctors, journalists, healthcare practitioners, people with PhDs, MDs, psychologists, whistleblowers, and damn good writers, in my opinion. So I had to think about how many people is it going to turn off if I say this is my opinion and go with it and have the courage to step out and take a stand, because it really wasn't going to work for me as a person. And when you learn my history, you'll understand why. So how, when, and why did I get off of psychiatric medication? It wasn't a conscious choice. Maybe there's been times in my life when I've wanted to frame it as such, but I think it's important for you to understand the facts and the truth of that, because it has a lot to say about our medical system and the history of this sort of thing. So, I was first hospitalized when I was 16. I was incredibly depressed. I was having insane crying spells that would last for hours. There was some agitated depression, some hyperactivity going on around that, but I didn't want to go back to school. It was the summer between my sophomore and junior year in high school, and I wasn't dealing with my identity very well. I wasn't dealing with the pressure of school and all that very well, and was doing some very odd things. I'll talk more about that in another video. So I basically, in hindsight, it took me many years to figure out the part of the problem with that initial hospitalization was that I had all these symptoms that I was presenting with that I wanted relief from. I desperately wanted relief from them. But what I really wanted was to find a space where I could be safe from and protected from my parents. And I literally believed as a young person that they were so abusive and I had been dealing with it for so long that I needed to get to a place where they couldn't get to me so I could tell other adults and that they would help me and protect me. And that did not go on. In fact, I would say the very opposite went on, because I came back with a slew of diagnoses: major depression, anorexia, borderline personality disorder, all of which were like signposts. Hey, this person might be experiencing abuse, but that's not how we're going to frame it. And it just completely invalidated any of my feelings. I said to someone who was a mentor and like a surrogate mom to me when I went into the hospital, she had bonded with me because she was my best friend's mother, and she grew up in a hellish, abusive household where her mom and her dad were alcoholics. Her story was she grew up in the early 70s, no, just before that, 60s, excuse me. And the abuse and neglect in her household was so bad that social workers found her as an infant with gangrene growing on her butt because her parents weren't changing her diaper enough. Gangrene. But even that was not enough to remove her from the home. That this was. So she saw the way my parents were and tried to have a really active, supportive role in my life. And I said to her, Jake, I think I've got PTSD. And she said to me, oh, I thought that about myself too. But it turns out that only people who have been in combat or tortured, like prisoners of war, actually have that. So you don't need to worry about that. We don't have that. Anyway, that was 1997. And boy, have we come a long way from that. So I was put on antidepressants that made me manic. I fought my psychiatrists. I believe, honestly, that the bipolar symptoms that I've incurred subsequently were iatrogenic. And there's a lot of research to support that. But unfortunately, it's not mainstream enough that a lot of mental health care providers are on board with that idea. And I'm like, I'm not going to work with you if, I'm just not going to work with this. I'm just not. So, I had another episode. I had a very manic episode after I got married and things were not going very well and I wanted to leave. And my then husband at the time told me that if I did leave him, that he would kill me. I was already, in all honesty, having mania that semester in college. I was living a lifestyle that just induces mania or symptoms, trying to stay up all night, studying, not taking care of my body, not exercising, not eating right, smoking, chain smoking. And so that kind of just was the tipping point for me to go into a great big mania, which ended up getting me, again, hospitalized. And that was when I would say the system really captured me as a patient, because I spent the next 8-9 years being very compliant and taking mood stabilizers in conjunction with antipsychotics and occasionally antidepressants in order to manage, which meant preventing relapse. And there was just an entire value set that went into that because, as far as I could tell, the basis for deciding whether or not I was within bounds as a patient was, are we containing and controlling the mania? Is she having mania? As long as I wasn't having mania, which didn't happen, I will give them that. It is really hard to get manic when you're sedated out of your mind, and even for the first 6 months, can't get out of bed. I remember once initially being so medicated coming out of it that I wet the bed, literally wet the bed. That's how tired I was. That's how much antipsychotics and mood stabilizers I was on initially. I was needing to go. I was just really tired. Yeah, that's really gross and embarrassing. I'm glad that that's like 25 years behind me now. So I did what they told me to and took what they prescribed. And I was very fortunate because, unlike some of my friends whose stories really were a warning to me, watching other friends get diagnosed at the same time but not have conservative prescribers was very illuminating to me. I will never forget that because I got off easy. Believe it or not, some of my friends deteriorated with the same diagnosis, but the difference was that my prescribers were conservative and theirs were anything goes, polypharma, heavy-handed, really bad listeners, in my opinion. So, okay, so what took me off meds? I had been working as a newspaper reporter. That was my first real job. I achieved that by my late 20s. I feel like I'm very, very slow behind a lot of my peers in my development. But somehow I managed to become functional again enough to graduate college and then take this very stressful job as a crime and courts reporter for a newspaper. The problem was it wasn't doing very well. The industry was in a big change due to the internet and loss of revenue, and then the recession set in. And so there were rounds of layoffs, and after about 1 year, in 2009, in March of 2009, I had my divorce finalized, and out of that lost my health insurance. 2 weeks later, I lost my job in the layoffs. And this was pre-Obamacare, so I no longer had insurance, but my bipolar disorder and previous hospitalizations disqualified me from getting insurance. Now, that was considered a pre-existing condition. So what ended up happening was I took a year off, got unemployment, got back into school on a workforce investment grant, became a personal trainer, quit smoking, ran a lot. I decided that because also in my early 20s, before I became a reporter, I worked for 7 years in health food stores. We sold supplements and we made food for macrobiotics and vegans, and everybody was into yoga and the alternative health scene. So I learned a lot about nutrition and supplements, and those were people who were already gently, I would say, and non-vocally, some of them more vocal than others, opposed to the psychiatric medication regime. And, I was fortunate. I had a great mentor who was my boss, who knew all kinds of things about traditional Chinese medicine and the macrobiotic diet. And I could talk to him honestly about what I experienced and what meds I was taking. So when the loss of the job and the loss of access occurred, I was already mentally in a place where I felt like I had done my level best to achieve a level of functioning that was or framed earlier as a long shot for me, because I was told, you have this condition, you can't handle stress the way that others can, you need to avoid stress, you may not be able to graduate college. I remember that being a big thing for me, going back, trying to think about which schools to go back to, because I had been at Bryn Mawr College when I had this breakdown, when I had this manic episode. And one of the issues I had with that college was that I was on a very minimal amount of financial aid, and everyone was double majoring because everyone had fear about being employable in the long run. And so I wanted to double major, and they told me that I couldn't because I was on too much financial aid, which was an effing joke to me, given the amounts and the tuition rates. But when I came back after having this diagnosis, they told me that I couldn't even go to school full time because that would be too much for me. So you find yourself in a very disempowered, childlike place where people are now going to tell you what you can and can't do. In addition, all throughout this time period, my prescribers and providers would do what they're trained into doing by the industry, which is, I would say it's coercion. I don't know what the proper term for it is, but there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation that they will use to rationalize lifelong maintenance, continued treatment. I am right now reading this book, Clinical Psychopharmacology Made Ridiculously Simple. It's kind of hard for me to say who this book is for. I guess it's for nurses, therapists, healthcare. It says healthcare practitioners, GPs, it says on the back. It is, I just feel like it's a very condensed, very basic, cut and dried primer about these medications. And so, I don't know who it's for, because it feels like anybody in those professions should have had this as part of their curriculum already. But for me, it's been very interesting because after having read all the whistleblowers, this book makes it clear to me that the people who are doing this, honestly, they are most of the time, their motivation is not malevolent. They truly believe that they have the answer and the solution and the remedies in these drugs. And later, I'm going to do a much more involved video picking apart some of the statements in this book, and we're going to talk about language and the power of language, and then the medical establishment's use of language to portray things not necessarily as they are. But no one is doing this out of a malevolent urge to fuck up the lives of young white American women who may have experienced trauma and abuse. That's not what's going on. It's not a conspiratorial. Now, behind the scenes, at the industry level, if you read people like James Davies or people who write about the history of how the DSM-5 and the ICD were written, there are some pretty, I will say, indicting factual accounts of how but that's at the elite level. That's at the level of the people who are forming these things. At the level of the regular doctor's office, your typical doctor, nurse, they really want to help you. And when you get to that place, you're really seeking help because you're really having real pain and issues. So how did this get out of hand? That is something I want to talk about later. What I want you to understand is that because it's embedded in these power structures, the economics of it, the industry of it, my choice to come off meds was sort of a quiet experiment. And only later did I endow it that was a significant turning point in my life. I was defiant because I had a quiet internal voice the whole time telling me that if I could focus on my physical health and become athletic again, that in spite of the incredible amount of indoctrination to the contrary that I had experienced, that some symptoms might go away on their own. In fact, it might be possible for me to live this covert life as a normal person and put all that behind me. And so that's what I did. And then when I had success at it and didn't experience anything like let's talk more about the threats. If you stop taking this medication, you will become psychotic within 6 days. I am telling you something that was verbatim told to me right before I quit taking all of my meds cold turkey. And I don't recommend that you do that. No one recommends that you do that. In fact, I'm really at a loss as to explain my withdrawal experience because it was not bad at all. I did have a rage episode. I did have a rage attack, but let me tell you, that person, they had it coming, and it was a long time coming. And after that, I don't remember experiencing any of the god-awful withdrawal that I have heard others talk about. If you want to get more into that, I recommend that you look up Laura Delano and the Inner Compass Initiative. I can't really tell you. I was on Depakote. That's what I was on, and I was maybe on Wellbutrin. I remember that year I'd been prescribed Depakote and Wellbutrin, and I quit the Depakote. It was the only thing that I was on when I went cold turkey, and I went cold turkey, and then I felt so much better. Like I didn't have horrendous withdrawal. I just felt better because I wasn't poisoning my liver and taxing my system with Devalpro X. Okay, so I actually had more energy. I was not manic, did not become psychotic, did not have the problem that I had was that the mania, they could contain and control the mania, but they didn't care that the depressions were getting worse and more severe. And when I was like 25, 26, I got fed up and I went to a couple of doctors and I said, I'm tired. I'm tired all the time. I'm never not tired. I am so tired that I am 25 years old and I am coming to you because I cannot fathom in my mind getting more tired with age because I don't have any more margin for that. And if you want to know what it felt like to be on those meds, take them. Oh, I'm not, don't really do that. It's a bad idea. If you really want to know what it felt like for me to be on those meds, just try to imagine, I don't know, being on your period and being hungover and having mono or something all at the same time. And I'd just be like, yeah, I'm still doing the work or school or whatever, but like, I'm tired. I'm always tired. This is what they said. One of them said, that's your depression. It's a symptom of your depression. Yeah. And another one said, that's because of the medications that you're taking for your depression. But no one at any point gave a shit. And this is my further point to you about, did I sit down and say, because, I mean, if you know me and you know my personality, it's an all too easily told story that I am just a rebel. I don't do what I'm told, I like to be defiant, overly analytical, whatever. No, there was no money. Okay. The Depakote alone in 2009 was going to cost $600 to $800 a month. I had been making $32,500 a year as a reporter. Then I lost that and was living on 80% of that through unemployment, and I had a part-time job, but I was poor and I was living in Connecticut. I was not about to spend $600 to $800 a month taking a pill to fix my emotions. My family, when I was first diagnosed and diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and it was explained to them the depth of this, oh my God, the depth, the threats, the coercion. You as a patient are told this, and then to reinforce it, your family and loved ones are told all of these stats about your condition, that it's so much more likely to make you homeless. It's so much more likely to make you a criminal, literally. It's so much more like you're 5 times more likely than the general population to commit suicide. So you see the point that they're constructing, okay, is that you are so dependent on them and these meds, or you will be dead, in jail, homeless, addicted to drugs, prostituting yourself. I mean, you name it. I mean, they were pouring it on me and others around me. It was not helpful. I resent it still. So that was part of why later, when I came off of it, because I didn't have a choice, because I had listened, I remember my mother once telling me, because half of my family took the diagnosis and ran with it. I mean, they were all about it. Like, it was a great gift to them. Talk more about that in another video. What a great gift it is to be told, no, you didn't abuse your child into the point that she has psychological and neurological damage. It's genetic. It's not your fault. She's just defective. Okay, and sorry, it is just a lot. So half of my family like picked that up and ran with it, and the other half was like more resistant. My father's side, they were more like about scapegoating and further toxifying things and saying, no, she must be on drugs. I know she's a drug addict because we're all drug addicts. I mean, ain't no way, right? Like, I mean, literally. So they don't want to hear, they wanted to blame and shame and stigmatize, and they were not hearing it. But my mother's family was like, they were eating it up, right? So I remember my mother telling me, Amanda, it does not matter if you do not have food in your refrigerator or gas in your car. You will pay for and take those medications. And I remember thinking, even then, at 21, to the extent that I still could think through the fog of the medications, so you want me to behave like a drug addict? You want me to do whatever it takes to buy those meds and take them because they're drugs? But that's okay. I can be like that because they're prescription. If I don't have food or what are you what? What are you what are you saying to me? Who are you? Anyway, it's really interesting, this pattern. Robert Whitaker talks about observing families of psychiatric survivors and how there tends to be a typical phase where they overcompensate and micromanage the person and are uber like controlling and all about it. And then as time wears on and shit falls apart because all this stuff is bullshit anyway, they get really burned out on that. And so they vacillate between these periods of like really high engagement and high levels of care and support that it may be not care and support, but that's what it looks like, and just completely just neglect, just like not caring, not calling, not checking in, not wanting to, because they're just exhausted by the person. They're just their consumer relative, it's just been too much. They burn out and then they cut off. They just fizzle out. So anyway, I've very much seen that in my family, but my point to you is, if you have like an abundance of family, loved ones, and doctors, and your team of providers that you've got going that are all really, really pro-industry, in the sense that they really think that this is the way for you to go and for you to manage your problems and your mental stress, and they really care about you, I want you to see what happens when all of a sudden it's not feasible. So do you think, for example, that the psychiatrist that was prescribing me these medications at the time that I lost my insurance ever gave a shit following? No, because she lost her pay. Like that. I don't remember her checking in. I don't remember her calling. I don't remember her saying she cared. I don't remember her having any questions about me being off meds because it didn't have a choice. I don't remember there being, no. See how much they give a shit when they don't have the money coming in. And then decide, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about that? So that was a period of time for 3 years when I became a personal trainer and worked as such, and we did not have Obamacare, and I did not have health insurance. And I became a quiet survivor. We didn't have the term psychiatric survivor back then. So there was no one for me to look outward in the world and identify. And it just became sort of a private thing, like, I'm doing this. It's working. I'm doing this. And that was important. That was a really important time in my life because I had just a bit of air coming in, and I could reframe some of my mental health struggles in terms of relationships, in terms of abuse. And I could really only do that by working with a therapist, doing a lot of journaling. There was a lot of turnover in the relationships. I didn't have the same relationships with my family, and I had gotten a divorce. So a lot of the relationships that I was keeping and managing when I was on meds, I didn't have to do that anymore. And being in therapy helped me kind of explore whether or not those diagnostic labels were relevant, accurate, why it would be the case that I would be able to go off meds and actually function better and be healthier. One of the things that's really important for me to teach clients is that you got to lose your clinical vocabulary. This is something that I am still to this day working on. Losing the clinical vocabulary. Do not tell me what symptoms you are experiencing. Tell me how you are feeling. Tell me what you are thinking. But if you're going to say, I'm having depression, I'm having anxiety, we have lost as a culture because this stuff has become so incredibly pervasive, normalized, accepted, unquestioningly so, that we have lost a spiritual vocabulary. We have reframed distress, pain, and suffering in ways that make it easier for us to buy into the pharmaceutical solutions. So we don't talk to each other anymore. We don't call and say, I'm sad today. I'm sad. Today I'm sad and I'm self-pitying myself. I'm still doing a lot of self-pitying. I'm upset about something that's going on. Or I feel the world is a darkening place because of these things I've witnessed. Firsthand or secondhand. Or I have fear today that I'm going to be in poverty. I fear, I feel intimidated by XYZ. I worry. We do talk about those things, but an inordinate number of adults my age and younger now instead say, I'm depressed, I'm anxious. It seems rather reductive. So losing the clinical vocabulary with respect to yourself and with respect to others. Now, that's something that's really kind of controversial because if you're going to lose it with respect to yourself, you got to lose it with respect to others, and right now online, there's an incredible amount of weaponizing of clinical vocabulary against others. This person is a narcissist. This person is codependent. This person is toxic because this person is this and this person is that. You can see how they have a this, and I think they might be, and I'm on the spectrum, and no, you do not want to be mentally ill. You do not want that. Decide for yourself that you don't want to be mentally ill. I know there's advantages conferred, but the cost is too high. I know you're suffering. I know you're in pain. You do not want to be diagnosed. It will not make you feel better. In the end, I've dealt with this for 24 years in my life. That's not strength. That's not resilience. That's not going to help with life. Okay, I had a friend. It seems like a small thing, but it isn't. It's a values thing. It's a rift with me and some of my friends and peers in age. I had a friend who is exactly my age, maybe a year older, diagnosed the same time, all of this when you're early 20s, and now there's a reason for that. on medication, her sister's on medication, and she is a parent of 3 children and a wonderful mother, but the situation with her ex wasn't ideal, and so these children have endured a lot of stress related to him and divorce and just a lot of stress on the family, and she began to medicalize people around her. Her ex-husband she medicalized. She decided he had a diagnosis than her son. And, just knowing what I knew about her son in very little, but my interactions with him, and just seeing how heavy-handed and how she was to go, oh, she would say, oh, this diagnostician, she's a specialist and she spent 45 minutes with him. And yeah, I mean, she's going to probably agree with me and she's going to say, and this is a child, he would be really good at math. So he would be bored in math and he would fidget. And this was intolerable in this high achieving, affluent bourgeois milieu. This is problematic behavior. And he would act out and he would do boyish things. I mean, the boy was doing boyish things. And by God, it must be that he's mentally ill. He must be autistic. He must have ADD. Perhaps meds are the way to go. I gave him a Benadryl. What? You fucking what? Why? And she said to me, Amanda, other parents have had to fight for this diagnosis. And I almost vomited. I mean, I was like, why are you fighting for your children to be diagnosed as ill when they're not? And that was part of at that point in my journey, I was like, this isn't just about me. This is, wow. We have some problems going on, don't we? Because I don't want children to be mismedicated. I was mismedicated. Not just for psychiatric things, but I mean, I will make another video. So, losing the clinical vocabulary puts you in a space where all of a sudden you are hang gliding. You are way out of the box. And there is no safety net down there. There's no safety net. Ain't no one gonna catch you if you fall. But it is incredibly, incredibly freeing. And it is perhaps the only way that you will come to know who you really are. Without these creature with wings with pins stuck in them. That's your diagnosis. Okay? Your life is your life. Your life is a blessed, sacred, unique, non-replicatable journey that you are on. Don't lose sight of that. Don't put it in a box. This was my struggle with my da-da-da-da-da-da-da. There's a lot more to you than that. So, the last thing that I want to talk about in this video is how losing my access to care, losing my insurance, and having to go the holistic route, because I'll remind you again, I did not get health insurance at all for several years. And this meant that I not only had to be fully responsible for making sure I didn't relapse with respect to mania or depression or psychosis, major mental symptoms, but that I had to take good enough care of my other physical health in order to not incur grave debt and expenditure, because I could no longer get health insurance, because I was shut out from the entire market, because that corrupt capitalist system that we were operating under prior to, God bless him, Barack Obama, finally achieving that. That meant that I was a throwaway person. I mean, I was in my early 30s and I was already not making it financially. And I just felt through the whole thing that it was literally like the society that I lived in was saying, yeah, we could do without you. I mean, who gives a shit? Like, you're not worth health care. You want health? You want to be healthy? And not only that, but it was so galling because I don't know, I've had so many different experiences with providers during this time. And I was grateful for it. Don't get me wrong. I know it sounds like a screed. I know it sounds like a tirade, but I was really, really grateful for this. It was incredibly liberating and it was incredibly empowering. And it confirmed what I thought about health. But I remember there being a point in time when I was working as a personal trainer and I was an independent contractor. Most personal trainers are you're like 1099, you're there to pick up clients. You may get paid hourly, but even if you get paid hourly, there's not going to be a healthcare plan offered to you. And at least that's how it was. So I had decided that I guess I was making enough that I would explore whether or not I could on my own privately purchase a plan. And I called up a salesman and he came to my house and he sat down and here I am. I don't smoke anymore. I run like half marathons. I am physically active at work. I mean, I have no health problems. None. I'm not overweight, obviously. My job was to teach other people how to get in shape. And this man comes to my house and sits down at my kitchen table. And when I tell him that I've had the bipolar disorder and 11 years prior was hospitalized, but I haven't needed to take any medication for, 2.5 years. And this is what I do for a living. And he said, I'm sorry. There's no way that I can help you, and there's no way that anyone is going to help you. There's no way. In other words, he was like, we won't take your money. Even as unaffordable as it still would have been, I was like, please, maybe I have, I don't know, $300 a month. I mean, but no, my money wasn't welcome. Just like when I would go to the doctor, they would ask, what insurance do you have? And I don't have any. Well, see you, bye-bye. I mean, literally, it was like telling a person, you have no worth, you have no value, you are garbage, bye-bye. And we did that to millions and millions of Americans, which leads me to my last point, which was that after years of living like this, because you see, I got really good at not needing health insurance and not going to the doctor. Really good at it. And I, after the passage of Obamacare, still weighed it out. Like, is it worth it to get a plan? When you're working in the gig economy, like, do you really want to spend that money or do you just want to save it in case something happens? So what I developed into was a very problematic person because my trust in doctors, my respect for the establishment, my willingness to go in, just even going to the doctor prior to like this past 2 or 3 years, I would say, I was really difficult. I felt really threatened. I really didn't want to be there. I didn't communicate well with my doctors because that relationship had been torn asunder. And I didn't realize it, but I was still processing all of that. I was still processing the idea that, oh, this is what we do. And it's okay. And you can trust doctors and you can talk to them, because for years I had just been, it was really hit or miss. And so I'm making this video. I hope you got something out of it. I'm especially wanting to hear if other people who during that time were shut out of the medical system, what the experience of re-entry into it is like. Because I suspect that if I have clients with this in their medical background or history, that learning to trust and work with your doctors and maximize the value of that and really capitalize on their expertise, that's a critical part of my program that I'm building for clients. I am not anti-doctor. I am not anti-Western medicine. I am not anti-allopathic. Please do not misunderstand me. But if you have had something that interrupted or disrupted your relationship with our present medical system, you may be still not advocating for yourself well, or not getting as much out of it as you could. And it's important to work on that and heal that. So, I think I've said enough. Good God, this video is long. I'm sorry. Anyway, my name is Amanda, and I live in the United States, and I'm an aspiring health coach. And I hope you're getting something out of this, because, yeah, thank you.